Howdy! Time to read. Time to read. See, my reading glasses, aren't they cute? I broke my other ones, but they're glued together. I hope they make it till I get a new pair. Don't get to go to the doctor till August 2nd, but I'll be here for a month. I just pray these glasses stay together. These, I think, are going to be a lot better for reading to you guys. We'll see. Chapter 27 of The Old Curiosity Shop by Charles Dickens. Dolls, Chickens. When they had traveled slowly forward for some distance, Nell ventured to steal a look round the caravan and observe it more closely. One half of it, that moiety in which the comfortable proprietress was then seated, was carpeted and so partitioned off at the further end as to accommodate a sleeping place, constructed after the fashion of a berth on board ship, which was shaded, like the little windows, with fair white curtains, and looked comfortable enough, though by what kind of gymnastic exercise the lady of the caravan ever contrived to get into it was an unfathomable mystery. The other half served for a kitchen and was fitted up with a stove whose small chimney passed through the roof. It held also a closet or larder, several chests, a great pitcher of water, and a few cooking utensils and articles of crockery. These latter necessaries hung upon the walls, which in that portion of the establishment devoted to the lady of the caravan were ornamented with such gayer and lighter decorations as a triangle and a couple of well-thumbed tambourines. The lady of the caravan sat at one window in all the pride and poetry of the musical instruments, and little Nell and her grandfather sat at the other in all the humility of the kettle and saucepans, while the machine jogged on and shifted the darkening prospect very slowly. At first the two travelers spoke little, and only in whispers, but as they grew more familiar with the place they ventured to converse with greater freedom, and talked about the country through which they were passing, and the different objects that presented themselves, until the old man fell asleep, which the lady of the caravan, observing, invited Nell to come and sit beside her. "Well, child," she said, "how do you like this way of traveling?" Nell replied that she thought it was very interesting indeed, to which the lady of the caravan, no, I just read that. Nell replied that she thought it was very pleasant indeed, to which the lady assented in the case of people who had their spirits. For herself, she said she was troubled with lowness in that respect, which required a constant stimulant, though whether the aforesaid stimulant was derived from the suspicious bottle of which mention has been already made, or from other sources, she did not say. "That's the happiness of you young people," she continued. "You don't know what it is to be low in your feelings. You always have your appetites, too, and what a comfort that is." Nell thought that she could sometimes dispense with her own appetite very conveniently, and thought, moreover, that there was nothing either in the lady's personal appearance or in her manner of taking tea to lead to the conclusion that her natural relish for meat and drink had all failed her. She silently assented, however, as in duty bound, to what the lady had said, and waited until she should speak again. Instead of speaking, however, she sat looking at the child for a long time in silence. Then, getting up, brought out from a corner a large roll of canvas about a yard in width, which she laid upon the floor and spread open with her foot until it nearly reached from one end of the caravan to the other. "There, child," she said. She said, "Read that." Nell walked down it and read aloud in enormous black letters the inscription, "Jarley's Waxwork." "Read it again," said the lady complacently. "Jarley's Waxwork," repeated Nell. "That's me," said the lady. "I'm Mrs. Jarley." Giving the child an encouraging look, intended to reassure her and let her know that although she stood in the presence of the original Jarley, she must not allow herself to be utterly overwhelmed and borne down, the lady of the caravan unfolded another scroll whereon was the inscription, 100 figures the full size of life, and then another scroll on which was written, "The only stupendous collection of real wax work in the world," and then several smaller scrolls with such inscriptions as, "Now exhibiting within, the genuine and only Jarley's unrivaled collection. Jarley is the delight of the nobility and gentry. The royal family are the patrons of Jarley." When she had exhibited these leviathans of public announcement to the astonished child, she brought forth specimens of the lesser fry in the shape of handbills, some of which were couched in the form of parodies on popular melodies, as "Believe me, if all Jarley's wax work so rare. I saw they show in youthful prime, over the water to Jarley, while to consult all taste, others were composed with a view to the lighter and more facetious spirits, as a parody on the favorite air of, If I Had a Donkey Becoming." Sorry. Just went out a little bit, didn't I? Facetious spirits. As a parody on the favorite air of, "If I had a donkey," beginning, "If I knowed a donkey what wouldn't go to see Mrs. Jarley's waxwork show, do you think I'd acknowledge him? Oh, no, then run to Jarley's." Besides several compositions in prose purposing to be dialogues between the Emperor of China and an oyster, or the Archbishop of Canterbury and a dissenter on the subject of church rates, but all having the same moral, namely, that the reader must make haste. Must make haste to Jarley's, and that children and servants were admitted at half price. When she had brought all these testimonials of her important position in society to bear upon her young companion, Mrs. Jarley rolled them up, and having put them carefully away, sat down again, and looked at the child in triumph. "Never go into the company of filthy Punch any more," said Mrs. Jarley. "After this." "I never saw any waxwork, ma'am," said Nell. "Is it funnier than Punch?" "Funnier," said Mrs. Jarley in a shrill voice. "It's not funny at all." "Oh," said Nell with all possible humility. "It isn't funny at all," repeated Mrs. Jarley. "It's calm and what's that word again? Critical? No, classical. That's it. It's calm and classical. No low beatings and knockings about. No joking and squeakings." Boy, next kill me. Okay, no low beatings and knockings about, no jokings and squeakings like your precious Punches, but always the same, with a constantly unchanging air of coldness and gentility, and so like life, that if Waxwork only spoke and walked about, you'd hardly know the difference. I won't go so far as to say that I've certainly seen some life that was exactly like Waxwork. "Is it here, ma'am?" asked Nell, whose curiosity was awakened by this description. "Is what here, child?" "The waxwork, ma'am." "Why, bless you, child, what are you thinking of? How could such a collection be here where you see everything except the inside of one little cupboard and a few boxes? It's going on in other wands to the wands, W-A-N-S, to the assembly rooms, and there it'll be exhibited the day after tomorrow. You're going to the same town and you'll see it, I dare say. It's natural to expect that you'll see it, and I've no doubt you will. I suppose you couldn't stop away if you was to try ever so much." "I should not be in the town, I think, ma'am," said the child. "Not there!" cried Mrs. Jarley. "Then where will you be?" I don't quite know. I'm not certain." "You don't mean to say that you're traveling about the country without knowing where you're going to?" said the lady of the caravan. "What curious people you are." Curious people you are. "What line are you in? You look to me at the races, child, as if you were quite out of your element and had got there by accident." "We were there quite by accident," returned Nell, confused by this odd, abrupt questioning. "We're poor people, ma'am, and are only wandering about. We have nothing to do. I wish we had." "You amaze me more and more," said Mrs. Jarley, after remaining for some time as mute as one of her own figures. Why, what do you call yourselves? Not beggars?" "Indeed, ma'am, I don't know what else we are," returned the child. "Lord bless me," said the lady of the caravan. "I never heard of such a thing. Who'd have thought it?" She remained so long silent after this exclamation that Nell feared she felt her having been induced to bestow her protection and conversation upon one so poor to be an outrage upon her dignity that nothing could repair. This persuasion was rather confirmed than otherwise by the tone in which she at length broke silence and said, "And yet you can read and write too, I shouldn't wonder." "Yes, ma'am," said the child, fearing of giving new offense by the confession. "Well, and what a thing that is," returned Mrs. Jarley. "I can't." Nell said, "Indeed, in a tone which might imply either that she was reasonably surprised to find the genuine and only Charlie who was the where was I? Reasonably surprised to find the genuine and only Charlie who was the delight of the nobility and gentry and the peculiar pet of the royal family, destitute of these familiar arts, or that she presumed so great a lady could scarcely stand in need of such ordinary accomplishments. In whatever way Mrs. Jarley received the response, it did not provoke her to further questioning or tempt her into any more remarks at the time, for she relapsed into a thoughtful silence and remained in that state so long that Nell withdrew to the other window and rejoined her grandfather, who was now awake. At length the lady of the caravan shook off her fit of meditation, and summoning the driver to come under the window at which she was seated, held a long conversation with him in a low tone of voice, as if she were asking his advice on an important point and discussing the pros and cons of some very weighty matter. This conference at length concluded, she drew in her head again and beckoned Nell to approach. And the old gentleman falling out again. Pros and cons, beckoning Nell to approach. And the old gentleman too, said Mrs. Jarley, for I want to have a word with him. Do you want a good situation for your granddaughter, master? If you do, I can put her in the way of getting one. What do you say? I can't leave her, answered the old man. We can't separate. What would become of me without her? I should have thought you were old enough to take care of yourself, if you ever will be, retorted Mrs. Jarley sharply. But he never will be, said the child in an earnest whisper. I fear he never will be again. Pray do not speak harshly to him. We are very thankful to you. She added aloud, but neither of us could part from the other if all the wealth of the world were halved between us. Mrs. Jarley was a little disconcerted by this. Okay, Mrs. Jarley was a little disconcerted by this reception of her proposal and looked at the old man, who tenderly took Nell's hand and detained it in his own, as if she could have very well dispensed with his company or even his earthly existence. After an awkward pause, she thrust her head out of the window again. Oh, Lord. And had another conference with the driver upon some point on which they did not seem to agree quite so readily as on their former topic of discussion. But they concluded at last, and she addressed the grandfather again. If you're really disposed to employ yourself, said Mrs. Jarley, there would be plenty for you to do. Plenty for you to do in the way of helping to dust the figures and take the checks and so forth. What I want your granddaughter for is to point them out. Point them out to the company. They would be soon learnt, and she has a way with her that people wouldn't think unpleasant, though she does come after me, for I've always been accustomed to go round with visitors myself, which I should. I should keep on doing now, only that my spirits make a little ease absolutely necessary. It's not common offer. Bear in mind, said the lady, rising into the tone and manner in which she was accustomed to address her audiences. It's Jarley's waxwork, remember? The duty's very high and genteel. The company particularly select. The exhibition takes place in assembly rooms, town halls, large rooms at inns, or auction galleries. There is none of your open-air vagrancy. They use W's and V's interchangeably. Vagrancy at Charlie's recollect. There is no tarpaulin and sawdust at Charlie's, remember. Every expectation held out in the handbills is realized to the utmost, and the whole forms of an effect of imposing brilliancy. Just leave off. Imposing brilliancy hitherto unrivaled in this kingdom. Remember that the price of admission is only 6 pence, and that this is an opportunity which may never occur again. Descending from the sublime when she had reached this point to the details of common life, Mrs. Jarley remarked that with reference to salary, she could pledge herself to no specific sum until she had sufficiently tested Nell's abilities and narrowly watched her in the performance of her duties. But board and lodging, both for her and her grandfather, she bound herself to provide. And she furthermore passed her word that the board should always be good in quality and in quantity plentiful. Nell and her grandfather consulted together, and while they were so engaged, Mrs. Jarley, with her hands behind her, walked up and down the caravan, as she had walked after tea, on the dull earth with uncommon dignity and self-esteem. Nor will this appear so slight a circumstance as to be worthy of mention, when it is remembered that the caravan was in uneasy motion all the time, and that none but a person of great natural stateliness and acquired grace could have been forbid to stagger. Could have forborne to stagger. "Now, child," cried Mrs. Jarley, coming to a halt as Nell turned towards her. "We're very much obliged to you, ma'am," said Nell, "and thankfully accept your offer." "And you'll never be sorry for it," returned Mrs. Jarley. "I'm pretty sure of that. So, as that's all..." Where was I? Okay, I'm pretty sure of that. So that's all settled. Let us have a bit of supper, which I've already just said. I'm sorry I keep drifting off, y'all. In the meanwhile, let me see how much more I got to go. This is torture for me and for you. 1, 2, 3. Too much for me to read tonight. I'm going to have to stop there. to this. Okay, right here. It's just a few more pages, but I just can't. How many times have I gone? Oh, y'all still here? And I just got a B12 yesterday. Lord help me. I think I need to go load up on some other vitamins, like who was telling me about all those? Deni? Lord, I need something for me. What is it? Ginkgo biloba for your memory. Forgot. I do like this. That is so cute. And I need to make one for my older Kindle. It's just as good as this one, really. Really. I'm going to let y'all go. And Lordy, I wanted to be done with this. You can't. When you're falling asleep, you make a big old mess. Y'all pray for me that I'll be sharp as a tack and wide awake tomorrow so I can finish this cow that what Joe and I are doing. It ends tomorrow. Pocket full of posies. So I can get back to do-rags. And I hope that'll fit. If not me, one of my girls. Love y'all. Be sweet. Don't be ugly. See you around the YouTube streets. Bye-bye.